I think what is important when you study menopause is actually to realize, okay, that you have a reproductive stage where you have the hormone cycle as usual. Then you have the perimenopause, which is the menopausal transition, which can take a couple of years, where you have a variable cycle length and you have skipped cycles and you have elevated hormones of one kind or another, but primarily unpredictable surges of estrogen, which can cause, and then withdrawals, which can cause the symptoms. And then after 12 months of not having period, the next day you're menopausal. It happens overnight. Did you know that? It's important because if you read studies, okay, it's sometimes very difficult to ascertain which group did they actually study. The other problem with depression or menopause is that these are sort of the hallmarks of depression: irritability, anhedonia. These are the hallmarks of menopausal symptoms that usually bring women to the gynecologist, not to the psychiatrist. And then there is the overlap, okay? And more we now see these women, and the problem is now even bigger because estrogen is a bad word. Hormone replacement therapy is a bad word since the WHI, and I'm not going to go into that, okay? So what has happened is that a lot of these women actually land on our doorstep. Again, you're talking about perimenopausal transition. You again talk about the HPG axis that goes berserk, okay? And the neurotransistor system. And again, you want to adjust the hormonal levels or reverse the sensitivity. So we're back to where we were, okay? There is also something that is new, and remember I told you when I showed you what Kessler said that they have missed this new blip, okay? The Harvard study of moods and cycles actually confirms that, okay? That there is a reciprocity between menopausal symptoms and depression. And the idea is that women who are depressed will go into the premenopause, perimenopause, menopause earlier than the never depressed women. That if you look at the menopausal status that follow up with the increased risk of first episode of depression, because that's the clue, okay? I'm talking about the first episode. I'm not talking about recurrent episodes. You will see that in the perimenopausal women who also have vasomotor symptoms, the incidence of new onset depression is much higher than what we thought. What happened with the WHI? This is a Canadian study looking at HRT prescriptions. This is the day after the media came out with the note that the HRT is bad for you. All of a sudden, the SSRI prescriptions jumped. Bad news, good news. The part of the good news is that we now know that SSRIs and SNRIs actually work well, or also for the vasomotor, for the vasomotor symptoms. And this is a study that we are in the process of publishing. Claudio Soares, who took over the Women's Health Concerns Clinic, is working on that. I just picked one, but we have at least 3 or 4 different studies that are showing much the same. That if you look at what happens with major depressive disorders in midlife in women, and you actually look at the response that you get on the hot flash related daily interference scale, the total scale, you will see that 8 weeks into a trial of a medication, you see enormous improvement, not just in the HAM-Ds and the MADRS, the mood scores, but also in the vasomotor symptoms. And then people say, and what about everything that we can buy over the counter? Well, I think that this is a very elegant Cochrane review that shows that all the stuff that you can buy is as good or as bad as placebo. And the only thing that really works, and still is the best, is hormone treatment, okay? So I don't think that we all threw out estrogen out the window and that there is no way of going about it, okay? You have to limit it. There are new preparations. We use mostly the patch. We use it for a limited period of time, okay? And not forever like the WHI did. I want to go back to all these three areas that I have sort of covered in my potpourri. And just to show you a very elegant study by Payne in 2007, looking at the prevalence of reproductive cycle-associated mood symptoms in women. These are women who are known to have a mood disorder, and this is 2,524 women, okay? And they include major depressive disorder, they include the bipolar 1s and the bipolar 2s. In all these milestones, whether it's premenstrual, postpartum, or perimenopausal, there is an increase in symptomatology and in episodes in this population. So, preventing recurrence of depression in women, the first challenge is achieving remission, because across all studies to date, the treatment that gets you well is the treatment that keeps you well, if it is continued. I want to go back to one thing that already others talked about it, and that's to bring in the genetics, okay, and the functional polymorphism in the promoter region, again, the serotonergic system. And these are the two very elegant studies published in Science, looking at the two copies of the short allele. They show more intense reactions to fearful stimuli and exhibit more depressive symptoms and suicidality in relationship to stressful life events in women. Last but not least, this is a journal that most of you probably don't read because it's epidemiology and we're not usually aware of these studies, okay? 7,518 elderly women in all kinds of geriatric homes, okay? And Mary Woolley looked at mortality, okay? And when you are 75 years or older, then on an annual basis, 5 women in that group will die of all kinds of things that ails them, okay? This is if they have 0 depressive symptoms. If they have 1 or 2 symptoms of depression, it rises to 10–12%. If they have 3 to 5 symptoms of depression, it's up to 17%. If they have 6 to 10 symptoms of depression, which by now qualifies for a major depressive disorder, the mortality rate goes up to 25%, and it stays there. The title of that paper is "Even a Little Can Be Deadly." I'm saying that because a lot of geriatricians, okay, have now finally realized that you have to treat depression even in the old woman. And this is another thing that she published last year, looking at the cumulative risk of cardiovascular events, again adjusted for age, okay? This is time in month, and you see that the women who have depressive symptoms have more cardiovascular events than those women who do not. And I think that Jens already mentioned the DALY, the Disability Adjusted Life Year. He talked about stress. They also said that depression, which was the number 4 leading cause of the global burden of disease in the 1990s, will come up to be the number 1 leading cause by 2020 if we don't do something about it. So, I said we're the marvelous sex, okay? Women are very complicated. But I think that women's mood found treatable, and there is still no hope for men. Thank you very much.